GM and Jen, everyone, this is Clément from Commit, and today I'm with Temoc from Gateway FM. Temoc, please, could you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Clement, thank you very much, first and foremost, for allowing me to come to Commit. And hopefully, we're going to have a very exciting discussion today. So, my name is Temoc Weber. I'm one of the co founders of a company called Gateway FM. We do the dirty job of building infrastructure in the crypto space. Yeah, that's a little bit about myself. I've been in tech for many years, roughly around 20 plus years. Came from traditional infrastructure, working in telecommunications for a number of years. After that, I moved to a browser company called Opera, based out of Norway. Spent there almost a decade. That's how I got beloved into the Web3 crypto space, and then eventually decided to become a solo operator and co-founded Gateway FM.
Awesome, thank you very much. So this is the first and easiest question. Could you explain Gateway FM like I'm five?
Yeah, so Gateway FM provides just accessibility to this new technology called blockchain. So similarly to the internet, you need, you know, kids today just say, "Hey, my Wi-Fi is not working," to access the internet. In order to access blockchain, you need accessibility and you need this connectivity. So that's what we build. We provide connectivity to different blockchains in order to, yeah, have applications to do, communication between the application, the end user, and the blockchain.
Okay. And what makes your so you provide connectivity,
Yeah.
so it's called RPC,
Yeah.
and how do you define RPC?
RPC is the protocol that is used in order to communicate with the blockchain. The
Yeah.
RPC, it's again, it is a protocol similar to you could consider like TCP/IP on the internet. So it's this protocol that actually allows to communicate back with the blockchain to post queries towards the blockchain if you want to execute certain what is called methods, and then get the reply back on those methods. And those
Okay.
methods could be different things. If you want to send a transaction, you want to get a hash, you want to get a block information. So in order to communicate with these different types of blockchains, you need to have this kind of RPC API endpoint.
Okay. And what makes Gateway different from Llama nodes, for example, Hopper, Pocket Network, Infura, all these also infrastructures and RPC providers?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And, as I indicated, I've been in the space for, since 2016, 17, working in Opera. And quickly we realized that just getting accessibility to the blockchain was difficult, first and foremost. But also, one of the things that we saw very quickly was that it was very centralized. Most of the providers today are really using public cloud, which again, I'm not against, but, building this new internet Web3 layer on public cloud alone seems to be kind of a very risky endeavor. And that's really what we try to do at Gateway. We consider ourselves to be the first truly decentralized blockchain infrastructure node provider. And we do that by actually building our own, you could say, AWS software stack that doesn't just rely on public cloud, but actually it's fully portable. And we take that to the next level where we actually work with independent data center providers. So we don't rely on public cloud. So it's a very different way of doing it in terms of really staying within the ethos of Web3 to really decentralize at the core layer of the infrastructure, the actual data centers, which again, if you look at this space today, most of the providers you mentioned today are using AWS services, mainly out of the US.
Okay. In my opinion, one of the biggest issue of EPC is scalability. I mean, especially during high traffic events. So, for example, I don't know, like there is like a massive airdrop. Like when we saw it during the Arbitrum airdrop, for example.
Yeah.
How is Gateway FM engineered to withstand these types of scenarios?
Yeah, so very good question, actually. We have what we call, autoscaler, and we do that by, it gets a bit technical, but we have different proxies,
You
and the
can go
proxies.
technical.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So the RPC, the nodes are actually in the back, and we create this pool of nodes, right, in different locations. So we have different nodes, and those nodes connect to a proxy, and the proxy does the load balancing. So we see requirements of additional traffic. We could actually divert traffic to other regions in order to, yeah, uh, ingest the request per second. And I could be pretty specific. Again, not to shill here, but we work with pretty large DeFi protocols like 1inch. We work with them quite heavily, and they have a lot of traffic. And this is pretty consistent traffic. We're talking about billions of calls per month, and this is very heavy traffic. And we had this situation where they opened the floodgates, and we had to divert traffic from one kind of pool location to add additional nodes, what we call external nodes, in order to scale the traffic. So this is definitely, yeah, as you said. I mean, the issue with blockchain is very unpredictable traffic. It's not something that you have this. Okay, this is kind of the RPS that you have, requests per second. It's a very spiky type traffic. It depends on a region to region basis, and you always have to be ready. So normally, of course, we look at having the possibility to ingest traffic per region, but if we need to, we could always deploy um, additional nodes in other regions to observe the traffic. There could be a little bit of delay in terms of the response time, but at least you're not getting this, out of traffic situation, which is the most critical.
Okay. And so speaking of that, so in terms of data consistency across all your nodes, what strategies or technologies are you employing to make sure that those RPC calls returns accurate information to the end user?
Yeah, absolutely. Another very good question. I think there's two parts of that. One is the privacy of the data that you're providing. I mean, if you look at the space today, as a developer, maybe you don't care too much if you connect and you get some free RPC from somewhere, but you don't know where that traffic is going and who's monitoring that traffic. You're exposing all of that traffic that maybe you're developing. But if you're like a pretty large DeFi protocol or DEX or um, somebody that cares about where the traffic is going, you have to be a bit careful, and you should know your provider, right? You should know where that traffic is going. So we do a number of things. First is when we work with the partners, we secure that we're very close to where the requirement of the traffic is coming from. So normally that lowers the latency of the traffic. So that's normally one requirement for larger DEXs. The other part is actually it's more in relation of the method calls. So we block certain amount of method calls to avoid DDoS or malicious type transactions, and only we will open that particular method call if the client requests. So we take the approach of be safe first, and then allow flexibility, because we've seen malicious things happening if you just open all the method calls, and there's a lot of hacking happening through that process.
Sure. And how do you, because this is a field that, I mean, with lots of competition. Um, how do you think of revolutionizing this the RPC solution game?
So it's a very good question. I'm just going to be very direct here. I think what is happening in the space for quite some time is there's a lot of investment coming in the space, and everybody thinks that they could run an RPC pretty easily. We know for a
Yeah.
fact that running nodes is a very heavy um, on Brighton type of work, because it's not a very sexy protocol, or it's not the next NFT drop, or it's not the super
Yeah.
DeFi protocol. But it's so important within the space. Having robust infrastructure, reliable, with proper SLAs, with proper support. It should be one of the key things that we want to do in the space, right? So when we started Gateway 2.5 years ago, that was our first task. There were two main missions. One is, okay, let's build our own software stack to again properly decentralize this in order to provide an alternative to just AWS. And again, I'll go a little bit into what's happening towards regulation, which is very scary, right? Like, we are all relying into one or two public cloud providers hoping that there's not going to be any incidents around regulation. But we have already seen with things like OFAC compliancy that the governments are able to block this permissionless type access. So we want to stay away from that. We're a Norwegian-based company that gives us regulatory-wise a lot of leeway. So that was kind of one of the first missions that we set up. The other part that we try to do was really build a lot of automation tools for us to actually not have this massive amount of work in order to, again, set up nodes, update the nodes. It's not very well known, but we spend a lot of time on client diversity. So, our nodes, in particular for Ethereum, work with Nethermind, we work with Aragon, we work with Geth, because there's bugs happening all the time and things go down almost on a daily basis. So we want to make sure that, we have the reliancy of both diversity of the clients. And also, we get the opportunity to work pretty close with these core developers, both on Nethermind, Aragon, just to make sure that, if there's a bug, that we could report it. So we give back to the community quite a lot that we don't see a lot of other participants in the space, in particular in RPC, doing. So that's one thing that we do. In terms, as you said, just to go back a little bit on the competitiveness of the space, it is very competitive. But if I'm honest, I think that we've done ourselves a disservice in the crypto space, right? By fully subsidizing the accessibility to blockchain. I mean, these things cost money, right? I mean, they're being fully subsidized today by mainly VC money, if I'm honest. And it's a bit of a shame, because this is like the foundational pillar of where we try to build all these decentralized applications. And, these things cost money. At the end of the day, they will only be subsidized for some period of time. So, we walk away from a lot of business that doesn't pay for the services that we provide. So we say, hey, we do things a bit differently. We provide best-in-class support, but it will cost you some money. At the same time, we provide a very generous, free public RPC, no questions asked. Like, we don't even ask you to provide an email sign-on. So you just go to our website, you copy the URL, and there you go. You have a pretty juicy RPC endpoint with no questions asked. So we believe on privacy as well. Of course, we have some limitations on the IP, so we don't get crazy attacks. But it's the proper way of doing permissionless RPC access.
You said something like quite interesting. In the end, I mean, it's VC money. Aren't you afraid to end up like some kind of decentralized, centralized RPC points?
It's a very valid question. I think what is happening in the space right now is that we're a little bit in the bubble, right? So most of these projects are being subsidized by VC that is subsidizing all the VCs, and there's a lot of ingestion in Web3. So we're feeding, the VC money is feeding all of the ecosystem itself. We need to break that. We need to be able to come out of the Web3 bubble. Everybody talks about the next billion users, but as long as we're not able to entice Web2 and enterprise companies to really use this technology, I think we're going to stay in this bubble for quite some time, and we need to be able to break that. There's a number of issues behind that. Mainly, I think, it's around the complexity of the technology. To be honest, it's still very complex for a Web2 company to say, hey, I want to do something within crypto, but okay, you have all these different APIs. It's complicated to put them together. You need to understand, quite a lot of moving parts, both in terms of the infrastructure, but also the protocols, how they work. And, the talent is pretty limited out there to actually build this properly. So I think that's still a bit of a problem. As I said, I mean, there's still I see two main centralization points. One is this public cloud, which today you have mainly AWS. Now you have GCP coming very strong in the space. Since last year, they make an announcement that they were coming in the space. They've been very quiet, but they're also getting into space because there's interesting money. I mean, they're selling data center capacity left and right. So that's one point of centralization. And then the other part, as I indicated, I think the VC money that is being pumped in the space, it's a little bit scary, because it really ends up being the same story as what you have in Web2. You have very dominant players which are controlling a lot of the ecosystem and not allowing for third parties to actually come in and differentiate a little bit. So, and I'm just going to be very honest as well in terms of what I see in the Web3, where everybody cares about this word called decentralization, but they don't really, If you scratch the surface and you go a couple layers down, still there's a lot of centralization, and
Yeah.
it's a very difficult word to expand. I believe more in infrastructure federation, similar to how the internet was built. We should kind of think in that direction, like allow third parties to come in to make the entire system more robust. And we're just talking about the RPC. If you look at all the services that are used, I mean, they're still so centralized. It will take years to get there, but we got to start somewhere.
Sure. No, you're definitely right on this part. I think, I mean, it quite aligns with, with what I'm thinking of this space right now. We're still in a huge bubble, and the next billion users, it won't come like just like with snappings. That they won't come just because it's cool or something like that. They will come because there is something to grab from it. And right now it's, yeah, basically the hedge funds, VC, and all of this big corporate money, until we haven't, I mean, found something really useful. Apart from that, we'll still be all together, like the degens, the developers, and all these guys, until we figure out how to bring the real use cases for the next
Yeah.
billion people. You
It's
mentioned, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please, please.
No, it's a very valid point that you're making, because if you look at the use cases that we've seen for the last iteration now, there have been two. It's been DeFi and it's been NFTs, right? There's a lot of periphery around lending protocols around DeFi, but if you look at it, it's two main use cases that we've been piggybacking for the last, I don't know, 3-4 years. And we need to be able to expand that, right? Because, I mean, the problem that we have right now in this space, there's too much block production. There's plenty of block space. The problem is where are these use cases coming in? And I think it's more of a problem of the user experience. It is very complex. You have all this complexity on the technology, and we need to be able to abstract that quickly, because it's still very difficult for your average person. You probably have friends, and when you tell them, oh, I'm in crypto, they think about the tokens, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
actually the underlying technology, fundamentally, it's so interesting. It could unlock so many potential use cases, but we're stuck on this technology bubble, just shining. Ooh, here's the new tech part of it. And we just focus on the tech, but the usability and the use case behind that, we have difficulties explaining to the enterprise world or the Web2 world, how can they use this technology to open up new use cases? It is one of the biggest problems that I see in this space, to be honest.
Definitely. So you mentioned one. I mean, you triggered the ultimate word. You said AWS earlier. I mean, most of the backend in crypto relies on centralized cloud services and stuff like that, and also, I mean, traditional RPCs relies on centralized servers. How does Gateway keeps its RPC services aligned with the decentralized ethos?
So as I indicated, we work with independent data center providers, and trust me, this is not an easy task. AWS is very simple. You set up an account, you go there, you get your services, you have all the tools, ding and whistles, you just pay the bill every month and you're good to go, right? No questions asked. Normally things work pretty well. So we decided to go towards this completely opposite direction, to say, okay, let me go and do a contract with a private data center. And that part is quite painful, because they don't understand about any services behind blockchain. They just think that we're just another Web2 server. It's like, no, we're not. We're actually a blockchain. The requirements are very, very different towards the traditional Web2 services. In particular, when you do RPC, you need massive data structure. So you need a lot of hard disks. You need very performant hard disks, a lot of IOPS. You need very scalable things, what we discussed before, right? Like if you get this massive peak of traffic, how do they manage that? Because normally, when you work with AWS, there's unlimited resources. With private data centers, that is not the case. So we spent the last part of the last 2 years really educating a number of data center providers. And it's super exciting, because they get so excited about this technology and they want to learn more. They want they want to come closer to the technology in order to provide the proper services, but it does require time. And that's I think one of the problems that I see in the space, that we're just too lazy. It's like, yeah, who cares? Let me just deploy in AWS and it's going to be great. We need to educate all of the industry, right? It's not just educate the degens, okay, like we need to really spend some time on educating the industry of the value of this technology. And with the value also comes this complexity. So as I indicated, we spent considerable amount of time with independent data center providers. And now those data center providers are, you could say a little bit more expert in terms of blockchain. So they themselves could go to other projects and say, hey, we could help you. We understand a little bit more about blockchain. We provide services that are tailored more towards your requirements. So that's a very unique thing that I think not many other providers have done. We currently have 7 different providers that we work with, and all of those are independent from each other. So that brings 2 things. One, reliability in terms of different data centers. So if one goes down, it does not impact the other one. So you have some high availability benefits behind that. You also have regulatory independence. We have data centers in Geneva, we have data centers in Germany, France, UK, Singapore, and these are completely, from a regulatory landscape, independent from each other. So it gives you, again, that additional reliability and resilience towards regulatory, predatory governments coming in and say, let's shut this thing down. If God forbid, but if Mr. Gensler were to get a bit spicy and excited, could just give a call to Mr. Bezos and say, hey, this blockchain thing, I'm not too excited about. Can you do something about it? And I think we'll be in big trouble in this space.
Yeah. Yeah, you're definitely right. This is something that come up to me a couple of days ago when everyone was like sharing BlackRock for winning their cases against the SEC,
EFT,
and
yeah.
there's nothing to be happy about that, because blockchain, crypto, and everything we are building, it's completely the opposite of
Yeah.
whether it is the SEC, whether it is BlackRock and stuff like that. So you are still cheering for the plague or, another disease.
It's so true. And we forget very quickly, right? I mean, why did the need for this kind of permissionless systems was because we want to move away from the old technology of server to client, right? We said, okay, we're
Yeah,
going to build this P2P network and it's going to be independent. The problem that I see that we're still building it on the structure of Web 2. And we need to
yeah,
change that. Like
completely.
and it just takes time and money, to be honest, and proper money. And it should be focused to say, okay, what are you doing in order to achieve the main goals of what we're trying to do in crypto, to create really permissionless systems? It's not, as I said, it's not an easy task, because if you look at the entire stack, we're only 10% there in terms of some decentralization. If you look at all the ancillary services that we all have to use, we still use all Web 2. It's a bit scary. As I said, I mean, it's good until it's not good. And
Yeah,
it's great that we're doing all of this work on buzzing up the word decentralized, but a lot of projects are not really doing that. So again, as I said, we're trying to do that, but to be honest, we don't feel the love of Web3 saying, hey, what you guys are doing is really important. We align with some projects like, again, not to shield, but we work very close with Gnosis for a number of years now. And they really have this vision of saying, hey, we want to be able to decentralize as much as possible, right? And, they find partners like us to be very aligned on the mission. And that's why we get to work with them in a very close environment to say, hey, the direction that you guys have, it's very aligned with our direction, and let's collaborate together and bring this more goodness to the space. But for the most part, many other projects just don't care about, like, hey, just provide me the fastest, biggest RPC at the cheapest price possible, and I'm happy.
yeah, exactly. So it will drive my next questions. So you mentioned Gnosis. Actually, you're providing RPC to Ethereum, Near, Phantom, Optimism, Polygon ZKVM, Gnosis as well. How do you prioritize? Sorry, which chains to support next?
Very good question. So we started with probably one of the most complex chains. It was near back 2.5 years ago, and we started with archival. So not EVM based and archival, which is very painful. So that taught us a number of lessons that most of the services that we see in the market don't really need archival nodes, and archival nodes are super beefy, very heavy. They need to be upgraded. They're clunky and chunky. But we try to look at alignment on both. What is the chain doing itself? Is there a benefit for us to participate to build this kind of decentralized public RPC together with them? And we do that kind of investigation. We check on the tech itself as well. Again, not to talk bad about some L1s, but some of them are built better than others. There's a lot of, because of open source, there's a lot of people or projects that decide, hey, I'm just going to take that piece of software, I'm just going to slap a couple colors and change a couple little tweaks, and there we go, we have our own chain. But we see a lot of replication over the last few years in terms of some of these chains not being pure enough. So we try to align with where both the demand is, where the technology is moving towards, and also with the alignment with the project. So normally the chains that we support, we get to know very well. So again, with the Phantom chain, we're very close to the Phantom Foundation. We're doing some really interesting things together with them. We understand their vision, so we support that chain in a kind of free public environment, just to make sure that they have a good opportunity to get a proper RPC service in a decentralized way. Same thing with Gnosis, and same thing with Polygon. The L2s that we have right now, those are more because there's demand from clients, but I would say there's a little bit less alignment. So there's a mixed bag. There's some that are kind of popular chains that we just support, because of market demands, but there's some others that we really spend considerable amount of time. We haven't updated our website, but recently we worked very close with the Stellar Foundation in order to build the new RPC, public RPC, which again is very interesting because they also saw the opportunity to bring kind of smart contract technology within their chain. So we're building this public RPC. It'll be ready, I think, in about 3 weeks. And again, there's a lot of alignment around this decentralization, this ethos of saying, hey, let's build things properly. So those are the kind of projects that we tend to coordinate very well.
Okay, interesting. So we are getting closer to the end of this podcast. I got still 2 questions.
Sure.
And I'm really these are questions that really matters to me, because we're going to talk about Gnosis. I'm a solo staker, so it's something that I'm really into it. And I'm really eager with the latest feature, the Gnosis Pay. So Gnosis Pay is some kind of simplified payment infrastructure on Gnosis, for the Gnosis card. How does gateway decentralized RPC solutions come into play in this game?
So very interesting to know for Gnosis. Again, they've been around forever. Gnosis Pay was really an idea that they've been thinking about for many years, right? And even like 3 years ago, there was XDAI with trying to make the payments. But one of the things that they saw is this UX problem is still very intrinsic in the space. So what they did for the last 2 years was to say, okay, there's enough tooling around, but the packaging of all that tooling to make the final end use case of doing almost instantaneous transactions, both on-chain and on fiat, is not there. And that's what they did for the last 2 years. So we work very close with them. Apart from the RPC, we also do a lot of validation for Gnosis. We run 50% of all the Chiado testnet network. We do our own staking on Gnosis, so we know the staking, the solo staking that they have is fantastic, to be honest. Now for a mid-sized staker is difficult because you have to have only one Gno, and the infrastructure cost behind that is a little bit painful, but they did that on purpose to, again, force decentralization. So everything that they do it with the mind of decentralization. And then, we work with them on a number of different projects related to Gnosis Pay. Eventually, we were the infrastructure provider for the actual Gnosis Pay itself, which is built originally on Optimistic rollup stack. Without going into details, that was the first launch, but we actually doing a migration from Optimistic stack to CKVM Polygon stack as we speak right now. Our testbed will be ready, I think by the end of today, if everything looks okay.
Okay.
We are working very close with Polygon CKEVM. We know the team very well and doing a number of things there. So we're very bullish on CK. We're not going to have time to discuss that, but I would love to discuss CK because I'm super bullish on it, to be honest. And I would like to dig down. But I think really what they've done fantastically well has been this kind of vision of saying, okay, let's just really focus on the end user. What is the expectation to do on-chain transactions with a debit or credit card? And they nailed that down to the T, like really fantastic. Of course, there's some technology pieces that are still being polished, but in general, they've been able to get all of this third-party tooling and projects to really coordinate together to say, how do we make this thing work end to end in an efficient way. And yeah, it's been fantastic. We've been working on with Gnosis on this for a good year, and yeah, super excited about that project. It really resolves a lot of issues in the crypto space. I mean, even for ourselves. I'll give an example. We get paid in cryptocurrencies. We have to convert that cryptocurrency into fiat in order to top up a credit card in order to pay some bills. So you imagine, right? This is the pain point that we have. Imagine having a credit card that is directly on chain or fiat. You could just decide, hey, I'll just top it up with my DAI or my USDC, and then directly have my IBAN account there and just make that transaction instantaneous. It's almost too good to be true, to be honest.
So you're going to DevCon to
Yes,
support.
absolutely. Yeah. It's actually one of my favorite events because it's not overhyped. There's a lot of really nice people there, like OG people.
Yeah.
You get to have really nice discussions with a little bit of privacy without not everybody being around. Yeah, as I say, it's one of my favorite events. Too bad this year I'm not going to be able to be there, but my co-founder Igor will be there. And yeah, just stay tuned because we are going to make a very interesting announcement at that
Okay.
con itself. So if you're there, I'll definitely connect you with my co-founder Igor.
I,
And
I wish I could. Honestly, I wish I could, but unfortunately, I won't be. I won't have the pleasure to come this year.
okay,
Unfortunately,
sorry
but
for
yeah.
that, but yeah, just pay attention. We'll be making a very interesting announcement at AppCon this year.
Awesome.
So
Okay, and so this is my last question.
hmm?
Yeah, you're guys based in Northern Europe. Do you find geographical factors influencing your approach to decentralized infrastructure today?
Yes, actually, as I indicated, we try to stay pretty neutral in terms of the location. So having, it's funny question because a lot of people don't think about this, but as crypto in general, you have a lot of Cayman Island entities. If you have a token, normally you try to stay within jurisdictions that are pretty friendly. When we decided to build this, we thought, well, let's just go to a jurisdiction that it's trusted, like Norway, jurisdictionally wise, trusted in terms of corporate function as a company. It's also very trusted, So we decided to build this kind of crypto company in Norway from all places, small city called Stavanger, which is the oil capital of Norway. In order, again, just to be a proper enterprise company, still working deep in the crypto space, to bring, again, the understanding of the value of this technology, right? This was a very important step for us to say, let's do corporate setup in Norway. We fully audited by PwC. We spent a tremendous amount of time. I spent a lot of time educating PwC about what blockchain is, what is an RPC, what is staking, how does that differentiate from proof of work to proof of stake? And really, again, as I said, I mean, we need to take that time to really educate auditors, educate enterprises, educate Web2 companies about the value of this technology. And we're doing that both on the corporate governance side of things, but also it brings this kind of goodness of saying, hey, these guys operate in a very trusted jurisdiction, which is also non heavily reliant on one particular region, right? So we're kind of neutral, being based out of Norway. Of course, as we deploy different infrastructure on different locations, those jurisdictions also get, I would say, check mark. So we try to be a bit conscious. To be honest, we don't have deployment in the US because of that one point, right? Because there's already plenty of deployments of RPC in the US, unless there's a client that says, I really need to have something dedicated in the US. We already have the partners there, but we try to avoid that jurisdiction for that purpose.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Temoc. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being on the podcast, and I hope to see you soon at the next event.
Absolutely, Clement. It's been a pleasure to be together with you today, and fantastic questions. Really enjoy this podcast, and hopefully in the future, as we make that announcement, let's go deep dive into zero knowledge. I'm really excited about that technology, so maybe we'll have an opportunity. Thanks again.